The Galactic Hegemony had ruled the stars for 12,000 years. They controlled over 200 worlds, and countless species bowed before their power. Their rule was simple: obey or suffer. No species had ever successfully challenged them, and none ever would. At least, that is what they believed. The Villani were a peaceful people. They had soft gray skin, large amber eyes, and gentle voices. They lived on a beautiful green world called Villan, where they farmed the land and raised their families in peace. They had no army. They had no weapons. They had only their kindness and their ancient ways of living with the land. But beneath Villan's soil lay something the hegemony wanted: rare minerals, precious metals, resources that could fuel their war machines for another 1,000 years. The hegemony sent their demands: surrender your world or face the consequences. The Villani refused. Not with weapons, not with threats. They simply said no. They would not leave the land their ancestors had loved for 10,000 years. High Arbiter Torvax sat in his golden throne and laughed when he heard their answer. He was a cruel being, tall and thin, with coal black eyes that had never shown mercy. He could have destroyed the Villani with a single command. But destruction was too quick, too easy. Torvax wanted them to suffer slowly. "Find me the most primitive world in the outer regions," he ordered his advisors. "Somewhere with violent, stupid creatures. Somewhere these gentle farmers will be torn apart." His advisors searched for 3 days. Finally, they found it. A small blue planet orbiting a yellow star. The beings there called it Earth. They had only recently discovered space travel. They still fought wars among themselves. They polluted their own air and water. Perfect, Torvax thought. Absolutely perfect. "Load 6 million Villani onto transport ships," he commanded. "Drop them on this Earth. Let the humans deal with them. Within 1 year, they will destroy each other. The Villani will beg us to take them back, and we will refuse. This is their punishment for daring to say no." The hegemony soldiers moved quickly. They gathered 6 million Villani from their homes. Mothers clutching babies. Elderly grandparents too weak to walk. Children crying for toys left behind. They were packed into cold metal ships with no food, no water, and no hope. The journey took 11 days. 11 days of darkness and fear. Many died before they even reached Earth. When the ships finally arrived, they appeared over 5 of Earth's largest cities at the exact same moment: Seoul, New York, Mumbai, Lagos, and Sao Paulo. There was no warning, no message, no explanation. Just massive alien vessels blocking out the sun. And then millions of terrified beings falling from the sky in small landing pods. Yuna was working at the Emergency Response Center in Bizen when the calls started coming. She was 34 years old, with tired eyes and strong hands. She had spent her whole life helping people during disasters. Earthquakes, floods, fires, but nothing had prepared her for this. "Aliens!" her coworker shouted, his face white with shock. "Aliens are landing everywhere." Yuna grabbed her jacket and ran outside. The sky was filled with small metal pods, drifting down like strange seeds. One crashed into the parking lot just 50 meters away. Smoke rose from its surface. Yuna could hear screaming coming from inside. She should have been afraid. She should have waited for the military, for instructions, for someone to tell her what to do. But Yuna had never been good at waiting. She ran toward the pod. The door fell open with a heavy clang. Inside, Yuna saw something she would never forget. A small creature, no bigger than a human child, with gray skin and huge amber eyes filled with tears. It was shaking so hard it could barely stand. Its thin arms were wrapped around itself, and strange sounds came from its mouth. Words Yuna could not understand. Behind the child, Yuna could see others. Adults, elderly, more children. All of them looked starved. All of them looked terrified. All of them looked at Yuna as if she might kill them at any moment. Yuna felt her heart break. She did not see monsters. She did not see invaders. She saw refugees. She saw families who had lost everything. She saw children who needed help. Slowly, Yuna knelt down. She removed her jacket, the one her mother had given her years ago, and wrapped it gently around the trembling child. The fabric was warm from her body. The child looked up at her with those enormous amber eyes, not understanding, but somehow hoping. "It's okay," Yuna said softly. Her voice was calm, even though her hands were shaking. "You're safe now. I don't know what happened to you, but you're safe now." The child could not understand her words, but it understood her tone. It understood her gentle touch. For the first time in 11 days, the small Valani stopped shaking. Within minutes, other humans arrived. Some were afraid. Some were angry. But many, so many, reacted exactly as Yuna had. They saw suffering beings and they wanted to help. Across the world, the same scene repeated itself millions of times. In New York, a taxi driver opened his car doors to a Valani family and drove them to a hospital. In Mumbai, a grandmother shared her rice with starving alien children. In Lagos, young men formed human chains to protect the newcomers from traffic. In Sao Paulo, doctors worked through the night trying to understand alien biology so they could save lives. The world's governments scrambled to respond. Emergency meetings were held. Military forces were deployed. Scientists rushed to study the new arrivals. But before any official response could be organized, ordinary humans had already made their choice. They chose compassion. In his golden throne room, far across the galaxy, High Arbiter Torvax received his first report from Earth. He expected to hear of chaos, of violence, of humans attacking the helpless Valani. Instead, his spy reported something impossible. "There, helping them, High Arbiter. The humans are feeding them, housing them, protecting them." Torvax's cold black eyes narrowed. "That cannot be correct. Humans are primitives, violent, selfish. They should be fighting over resources, not sharing them. I can only report what I observe, High Arbiter. The humans appear to be welcoming the refugees." Torvax dismissed the report as an error. Surely the humans would soon reveal their true nature. Surely the violence would begin any day now. He was wrong. In Bizin, Yuna carried the small Valani child to the emergency shelter she had helped set up. Around her, hundreds of volunteers were arriving with food, blankets, and medicine. Nobody had ordered them to come. Nobody had forced them. They simply saw beings in need and came to help. The child clung to Yuna's jacket, still not understanding where it was or what would happen next. But for the first time since soldiers had torn it from its home, the child felt something strange and wonderful. It felt hope. The first weeks were chaos. Beautiful, terrible, exhausting chaos. 6 million Valani had arrived on Earth with nothing but the clothes on their bodies. They could not speak any human language. They could not eat most human food. Their bodies were weak from the long journey, and their hearts were broken from losing their home. Helping them seemed impossible, but humans have always been stubborn creatures. When told something cannot be done, they simply work harder until it is done. Teho was a 67-year-old professor who had spent his entire career studying languages. He had been retired for 2 years, spending his days reading books and drinking tea in his small apartment in Daegu. When the Valani arrived, he turned on his television and watched the chaos unfold. He saw the alien refugees trying desperately to communicate, making sounds no human could understand. The next morning, Taiho packed a small bag and traveled to the nearest refugee center. He introduced himself to the workers there and made a simple request. Let me talk to them. For 3 months, Taiho worked 18 hours every day. He recorded Vellani sounds and played them back. He pointed at objects and listened to what the Vellani called them. He watched how they moved their hands when they spoke, how their amber eyes changed with different emotions. Slowly, word by word, he began to build a bridge between two worlds. Other linguists joined him. Students, professors, amateur enthusiasts. They shared their findings online, building a database that grew larger every day. People around the world downloaded the translation guides and began learning Vellani words. The first complete sentence a Vellani spoke to humans came on a cold November morning. An elderly Vellani woman looked at Taiho with her tired amber eyes and said, in broken but understandable Korean, "Why do you help us?" Taiho felt tears running down his wrinkled cheeks. He thought carefully about his answer. "Because you needed help," he said simply. "That is enough reason." The woman stared at him for a long moment. In her entire life under hegemony rule, she had never heard such words. Help was always given with conditions. Kindness always came with a price. The idea that beings would help strangers simply because they needed help was something she could not quite believe. But slowly, she was beginning to. Food was another enormous problem. The Vellani bodies could not process most human foods. Meat made them violently sick. Many fruits and vegetables caused dangerous allergic reactions. In the first weeks, hundreds of Vellani died simply because no one knew what they could safely eat. And Ji was a young agricultural scientist working at a research institute outside Seoul. She was 29 years old, brilliant and determined. When she learned about the food crisis, she abandoned all her other projects and focused completely on finding solutions. She tested hundreds of foods on willing Vellani volunteers, carefully monitoring their reactions. She discovered that certain types of rice were safe. Some root vegetables, like sweet potatoes and radishes, could be eaten without problems. And surprisingly, kimchi, the fermented cabbage that Koreans had eaten for centuries, was not only safe for Vellani, but actually very healthy for them. Yoonji published her findings immediately, refusing to patent anything. "This is not about money," she told reporters. "This is about keeping people alive." Farmers around the world began growing Vellani-safe crops. Within months, the food crisis began to ease. But not everyone welcomed the refugees. In many countries, angry groups protested against the Vellani presence. They carried signs saying, "Earth for humans," and "Send them back." Some politicians gave speeches about protecting human jobs and human resources. In a few terrible incidents, Vellani were attacked and beaten. Dohyun was a construction foreman in Incheon. He was 45 years old, with rough hands and a quiet voice. He had never thought much about aliens or space or anything beyond his daily work. But when he saw news footage of a Vellani family being attacked by a mob, something changed inside him. The next day, Dohyun gathered his workers together. "We build things," he told them. "That's what we do. Right now, there are millions of beings who need homes. I'm going to help build those homes. Anyone who wants to join me is welcome." Half his workers walked away. The other half stayed. Together, they traveled to the nearest refugee camp and began working. They turned old warehouses into shelters. They converted abandoned schools into living spaces. When they ran out of materials, local communities donated whatever they could spare. Other construction teams followed Dohyun's example. Across the world, humans began building homes for their new neighbors. It was not charity given from above. It was neighbors helping neighbors. Ordinary people doing extraordinary things. The Vellani did not simply receive this help passively. Despite their trauma, despite their grief, they began contributing whatever they could. Their knowledge of farming was far more advanced than anything on Earth. For 10,000 years, they had learned to grow food without destroying the land. They taught human farmers techniques that double crop yields while using half the water. They showed scientists how to create natural fertilizers that made chemical ones unnecessary. Their understanding of medicine was equally valuable. Valani doctors, once they learned enough human language to communicate, began sharing their knowledge. 3 human diseases that had been considered incurable were cured within the first year using Valani treatments. Human researchers were amazed at what their new colleagues could teach them. By the end of the first year, something remarkable had happened. The Valani were no longer just refugees. They were becoming neighbors. They were becoming friends. In some cases, they were becoming family. Yuna, the emergency response coordinator who had first welcomed the Valani child, had continued working at the refugee center in Bizan. The child she had wrapped in her jacket, whose name she had learned was Lyra, had no surviving family. The little girl had watched her parents die during the forced evacuation from Valan. Yuna began visiting Lyra every day. She brought food, taught her Korean words, and held her when she cried at night from terrible dreams. After 6 months, Yuna made a decision that would change both their lives. She adopted Lyra. The paperwork was complicated. There were no laws for adopting alien children. But Yuna fought through every obstacle with the same determination she had shown on that first day. When the adoption was finally approved, Lyra wrapped her thin gray arms around Yuna's neck and spoke her first complete Korean sentence. "Mother," she said. "My mother." Far across the galaxy, High Arbiter Torvax read the yearly report on Earth with growing disbelief. The humans had not collapsed into violence. They had not begged for a Gemini intervention. They had not done anything his advisors had predicted. Instead, they had done the impossible. They had taken 6 million broken, helpless refugees and begun turning them into citizens, into neighbors, into family. "This changes nothing," Torvax declared, though his voice was less certain than before. "Humans are still primitives. They will fail eventually. They must fail." But deep in his cold heart, a small seed of doubt had been planted. What if they did not fail? What if, against all logic and all history, the humans actually succeeded? That possibility frightened him more than any weapon ever could. 5 years after the arrival, Earth had become something new. The streets of cities around the world had changed in ways nobody could have predicted. In Seoul, human children walked to school alongside Valani classmates, chattering in a mixture of Korean and Valani that adults struggled to follow. In New York, Valani restaurants served dishes that blended 2 worlds of cooking. In Mumbai, Valani musicians played alongside Indian artists, creating sounds that had never existed before. The fear and anger of the early days had not disappeared completely. There were still those who hated the newcomers, who dreamed of a world where humans lived alone. But they were fewer now, and their voices were quieter. It is hard to hate someone when you see their children playing with your children every day. Sujin had been struggling before the arrival. She was a single mother in Gwangju, working 2 jobs just to feed herself and her young son. Her restaurant had failed 3 times. Her savings were gone. She had been ready to give up. Then she met Mira. Mira was a Valani widow. She had lost her husband and 2 of her 3 children during the evacuation from Velan. Only her youngest daughter had survived. When Myra arrived on Earth, she had nothing but grief and a determination to build a new life for her remaining child. The 2 women met at a community center where volunteers were teaching Valani refugees how to cook with Earth ingredients. Sujin had come to help. Mira had come to learn. They could barely communicate at first, but cooking needs few words. Soon they were working side by side, mixing Korean recipes with Valani techniques. Their dishes were extraordinary. The combination of flavors and methods created something neither species had ever tasted before. People who tried their food came back again and again, bringing friends and family. "We should open a restaurant," Sujin said one evening, half joking. Myra looked at her with serious amber eyes. "Yes," she said in her careful Korean. "We should." They opened their small restaurant 6 months later. It was crowded from the first day. Humans and Villani came together to share meals, to talk, to become something more than strangers. Within 3 years, Sujin and Myra had opened 5 more restaurants across Korea. But more important than the business was what had grown between them. They had become sisters. Their children had become siblings. 2 families broken by loss had rebuilt themselves into one. The children of Earth were leading the transformation. They adapted faster than anyone had expected. In schools from Jeju to Johannesburg, human and Villani students learned together, played together, grew together. They invented new games that combined human sports with Villani traditions. They created new slang that mixed words from both languages. They looked at each other and saw not aliens, but friends. Jasung had been a soldier once. He had fought in conflicts he no longer wanted to remember, seen things he tried to forget. After leaving the military, he had become a teacher, hoping to build something instead of destroying it. When the Villani arrived, his school received 50 new students who could not speak Korean and did not understand human customs. Many teachers complained. Many parents protested. But Jae-sung saw an opportunity. He watched his students carefully in those first months. The human children were creative and energetic, always asking questions, always wanting to try new things. The Villani children were patient and thoughtful, always considering consequences, always thinking about the future. Separately, each group had strengths and weaknesses. Together, they balanced each other perfectly. Jae-sung changed how he taught. He paired human students with Villani partners, letting them learn from each other. He assigned projects that required both creativity and patience. He watched his children, who had never met before, became inseparable friends. "What do you want to be when you grow up?" he asked his class one day. A human boy raised his hand. "I want to be a starship captain," he said. "Me and Kiro are going to explore the galaxy together." He pointed at his Villani desk partner, who nodded with a shy smile. Jae-sung felt tears in his eyes. A generation was growing up that could not imagine a world without the Villani. To them, this was simply how things were. Humans and Villani together, building a future neither could build alone. Earth's technology advanced rapidly during these years. Villani scientists, once they had learned human languages and methods, began sharing knowledge that their species had developed over 10,000 years. Human researchers listened eagerly, combining this ancient wisdom with human innovation. Clean energy became cheap and plentiful. New medical treatments extended human lives and cured diseases that had killed millions. Environmental damage that had taken centuries to create began healing in years. The Earth itself seemed to be recovering, as if grateful that its inhabitants had finally learned to care for it properly. Space technology improved dramatically. Villani had traveled between stars long before humans left their planet. They understood physics and engineering that human scientists were only beginning to discover. Shared freely, this knowledge pushed human space programs forward by decades. The first human Villani joint space station was completed 3 years after the arrival. It orbited Earth like a symbol of what 2 species could accomplish together. Astronauts and scientists from both peoples lived and worked side by side, looking down at the blue planet that had become home to both. High Arbiter Torvax watched these developments with growing fear. His spies sent regular reports, and each one was worse than the last. "They've developed faster than light communication," one report stated. Based on Villani designs, improved with human modifications. Their space vessels now match hegemony scout ships in capability, another reported. At current rate of improvement, they will surpass us within 20 years. Most troubling, a final report concluded, is the unity of their society. Human-Volani integration is nearly complete. They think of themselves as one people now. They call themselves Terrans. Torvax threw the reports across his chamber in rage. This was not supposed to happen. The humans were supposed to be primitive, violent, selfish. They were supposed to destroy the Volani, not embrace them. They were supposed to remain weak and divided, not become strong and united. What have we done? He whispered to himself in the darkness of his throne room. He had intended to punish the Volani by sending them to die among savages. Instead, he had given them allies. He had handed them partners who would help them grow stronger than ever before. He had created, through his own cruelty, the greatest threat the hegemony had ever faced. And somewhere in the back of his mind, a terrible thought formed. What if the humans came for revenge? What if they remembered how the hegemony had dumped 6 million refugees on their world like garbage? What if, strengthened by Volani knowledge and united by shared struggle, they decided to strike back? For the first time in his long life, High Arbiter Torvax knew fear. On Earth, no one was thinking about revenge. They were too busy building, creating, growing. In her home in Bizan, Yuna helped her adopted daughter Lyra with homework while her human son played games with Myra's daughter in the next room. In Gwangju, Sujin and Mira planned the opening of their 7th restaurant. In classrooms everywhere, children who had been strangers 5 years ago now called each other family. The hegemony had dumped 6 million refugees on Earth, expecting destruction. Instead, Earth had created something they could not understand, something they had no defense against. They had created love. 10 years after the arrival, humanity reached the stars. The first human Volani starship was called Unity. It was not large by hegemony standards. Smaller than their battle cruisers, barely bigger than their patrol vessels. But it represented something the hegemony had never seen before. It was built by 2 species working as one. Every bolt, every wire, every system combined the best of human creativity with the best of Volani wisdom. The ship's captain was Hai Jin. She was 30 years old, born in Bizan to a mother who had once wrapped her jacket around a frightened alien child. Hai Jin had grown up with Lyra as her sister, playing together, studying together, dreaming together of the stars. Now she commanded a crew of 40 half-human and half-Volani on a mission that would change history. "Are you afraid?" her first officer asked. He was a Volani named Bora, whose parents had been among the first refugees to arrive in Korea. Hai Jin smiled. "My mother taught me that fear is natural, but it shouldn't stop us from doing what's right." She was afraid when she ran toward that landing pod 10 years ago. She helped anyway. "Your mother is a wise woman. She's the reason we're here," Hai Jin said. "There are millions of others who chose compassion over fear. We're just continuing what they started." Unity's mission was not military. Earth's leaders had debated for months about what to do with their new capabilities. Some wanted revenge against the hegemony. Others wanted to hide and build strength in secret. But most agreed on a different path. They would send a message. The Unity traveled for 3 days, through the strange dimension of faster-than-light space. When it emerged, it was at the edge of hegemony territory, close enough to be detected immediately by their sensors. Alarms screamed throughout the hegemony capital. Admiral Torvax, who had been promoted for his handling of the Volani situation a decade ago, rushed to the command center. "One ship," he said, studying the sensor data. "They send one ship against us?" "It matches no known design," his aide reported nervously. "Its construction appears to be hybrid, combining human and Volani technology." "One ship," Torvax repeated, but his voice was less certain now. "What do they hope to accomplish?" The answer came moments later when Unity began broadcasting on every hegemony frequency. Hyjin's face appeared on screens across the Empire. Behind her stood her crew, Human and Villani side by side, all of them calm and unafraid. 10 years ago, Hyjin began, speaking slowly and clearly. You dumped 6 million souls on our world. You expected us to destroy each other. You thought our compassion was weakness. You thought our differences would tear us apart. You were wrong. Torvax gripped the arms of his command chair until his knuckles turned white. The Villani came to us broken and afraid, Hyjin continued. Today, they stand beside us as family. Their children call Earth home. Our children call them kin. We are no longer two species. We are one people. Across the hegemony, billions of beings watched. Enslaved species in mines and factories stopped their work to listen. Oppressed peoples on dozens of worlds looked up from their suffering. They heard something they had not heard in thousands of years, that hope. We are not here to fight you, Hyjin said. We could fight. Make no mistake about that. In 10 years, we have advanced further than your empire has in 1,000. Your weapons do not frighten us. Your threats do not move us. But we are not here for war. Torvax leaned forward, confused. If not war, then what? We are here to offer you something you have clearly never experienced. An alternative. There are 16 billion beings on Earth now, human and Villani together. Every single one of them chose this. Chose cooperation. Chose kindness. Chose family. Hyjin's voice grew stronger, filled with a quiet power that needed no weapons to enforce. Your empire is built on cruelty and fear. Ours is built on something you cannot comprehend. Love. Not the weak love of those who have never suffered. The strong love of those who have suffered and chosen compassion anyway. We will not attack you. We do not need to. Your empire is already dying. It has been dying for centuries. Fear and cruelty can force obedience, but they cannot inspire loyalty. The moment your subjects see another way, they will leave you. And now they have seen another way. Torvax felt cold spreading through his body as he understood what was happening. This was not an invasion. It was something far more dangerous. Know this, Hyjin said, her voice reaching every corner of the empire. Any species you abandon, any refugees you dump on distant worlds, hoping they will be destroyed, we will find them. We will welcome them. And with each one, we will grow stronger. Your cruelty makes us stronger. Your hatred makes us more united. Every victim you create becomes our family, and our family has no limits. She paused, letting her words sink in. We are humans. We are Villani. We are Terrans. And we are coming. Not with weapons. Not with armies. With open hands and open hearts. And that, Admiral Torvax, is something all your warships cannot defeat. The transmission ended in the silence that followed. Something happened that had not happened in the hegemony for generations. On a mining world called Nexus 7, enslaved workers refused to return to their stations. On a factory planet in the outer regions, supervisors found their workers had abandoned their posts to discuss what they had heard. On a dozen worlds across the empire, beings began whispering a word that had been forbidden for centuries. Freedom.Torvax. Watch the reports coming in from across his empire. Unrest, disobedience, hope spreading like a disease among species that had been broken for generations. Send warships to restore order, he commanded. Admiral, his aide said carefully, we do not have enough ships to police every world at once. If we concentrate forces in one area, unrest will spread in others. Then build more ships. With what wars, Admiral? The laborers are no longer cooperating as efficiently as before. Production has dropped across all sectors. Torvax stared at the tactical display showing his vast empire. For the first time, he saw it not as a symbol of power, but as a prison. A prison that required constant force to maintain. A prison whose walls were beginning to crack. "Destroy their ship," he ordered. "Destroy it now, before they can spread more of their poison." 3 hegemony warships moved to intercept Unity. They were massive vessels, each one capable of destroying a small planet. Against them, Unity was like an insect facing giants. But when they reached Unity's coordinates, the ship was gone. It had slipped back into faster-than-light space, leaving nothing behind but the echo of its message. A message that could not be destroyed. A message that was already spreading to every corner of the Empire. A message that carried more power than any weapon. You do not have to live this way. There is another choice. Come to us and become family. On Earth, Hyjin and her crew emerged from their journey to cheering crowds. Yuna was waiting at the landing site, tears streaming down her face, her adopted daughter Lyra beside her. "Did it work?" Lyra asked. "Did they hear us?" Hyjin embraced her sister, Human and Volani holding each other tight. "They heard us," she said. "Now we wait, and we prepare to welcome whoever comes." The reckoning had begun, not with battles and bloodshed, but with something far more powerful than an invitation. 50 years after the arrival, the galactic hegemony was gone, not destroyed in war, not conquered by armies. It had simply fallen apart, piece by piece, as species that had been enslaved for generations chose a different path. Some joined the growing Earth Alliance. Others formed their own nations among the stars. Many simply chose freedom after knowing nothing but chains for thousands of years. High Arbiter Torvax had died 30 years earlier, alone and forgotten. His empire had crumbled around him while he sat in his golden throne, still unable to understand what had happened. How had compassion defeated cruelty? How had love overcome fear? These questions haunted him until his final breath. On Earth, now the heart of an alliance of 47 species, life had become something beautiful. The city of Bizon had grown into one of the most important places in the galaxy. Beings from dozens of worlds walked its streets, shopped in its markets, ate in its restaurants. Children, who might have been enemies under the old order, played together in parks and schools. The language spoken there was a blend of Korean, Volani, and pieces of a dozen other tongues. In the harbor, a great monument stood. It was carved from white stone brought from 3 different worlds, shaped by artists from species that had never met before the Alliance. The statue showed a human woman kneeling down, wrapping her jacket around a small alien child. Beneath it, simple words were carved in 50 languages. Here began the change. Here, fear became love. Yuna had died peacefully at 91, surrounded by family. Her adopted daughter Lyra held her hand at the end, along with Lyra's own children, some human, some Volani, some from other species entirely. Yuna's biological son was there too, with his Volani wife and their children. The room had been crowded with people who traced their family back to one woman's choice to show kindness to a stranger. Her final words, witnessed by billions across the galaxy through broadcasts, were simple and true. "Was it hard?" she had said, her voice weak but clear. Yes, it was hard. Every day was hard. Was it worth it? Yes, every single day was worth it. Remember that. Remember that kindness is never wasted, even when it costs you everything. Jiho, her grandson, had wept at her bedside. He was 52 years old now, with gray streaking his dark hair. His father had been human. His mother was Volani. His wife came from a reptilian species called the Serini, rescued by Earth Alliance ships just 8 years ago. His children carried the heritage of 3 worlds in their blood. And today, Jiho, was becoming the first president of the Earth Alliance. The ceremony was held in a great hall that could seat 10,000 beings. Representatives from every Alliance species were present. Humans sat next to Villani sat next to Serini. A dozen other species filled the remaining seats, all of them watching as Jiho walked to the speaking platform. He looked out at the crowd and felt the weight of history pressing down on him. 50 years ago, his grandmother had wrapped a jacket around a frightened alien child. Now he was leading an alliance of billions, a family of dozens of species. A dream that his ancestors could never have imagined. 50 years ago, Jiho began. The Galactic Hegemony dumped 6 million refugees on Earth. They believed they were punishing the Villani by sending them to die among savages. They believed that humans, faced with millions of hungry strangers, would react with violence and hatred. They believed that different meant dangerous, that scarcity meant conflict, that the only way to survive was to dominate others. He paused, looking at the faces before him. Human faces. Villani faces. Faces covered in scales or feathers or bioluminescent spots. All of them listening. All of them family. The hegemony looked at the universe and saw scarcity. They saw limited resources that must be hoarded, limited space that must be defended, limited compassion that must be saved only for their own kind. This was their great mistake. This was the lie at the heart of their empire. Humanity looked at 6 million strangers falling from the sky and saw something different. We saw not mouths to feed but hands to hold. Not a burden but a blessing. Not aliens but family waiting to be found. Jiho's voice grew stronger, filled with emotion. That is what makes us human. Not our biology. Many of us standing here today have no human blood at all. Not our planet of origin. Earth has become home to countless species now. What makes us human is our choice. Our stubborn, irrational, magnificent choice to love first and figure out the rest later. The hegemony built their empire on a foundation of fear. Fear of strangers. Fear of difference. Fear of change. Their empire lasted 12,000 years, but it was always dying, always rotting from within, because fear cannot sustain life. Only love can do that. We built our alliance on a different foundation. When the Villani came, we chose to help them. When other refugees followed, we welcomed them too. Each time we could have chosen fear, we chose love instead. Each time we could have built walls, we built bridges instead. And look at what we have become. He gestured at the great hall, at the thousands of beings gathered together. We are not one species. We are 47 species. We speak hundreds of languages. We come from worlds scattered across the galaxy. Our biologies are different. Our histories are different. Our traditions are different. But we are one people. We are family. We chose each other, and that choice has made us stronger than any empire based on force could ever be. The stars once belonged to empires of fear. Now they belong to families of choice. And this is only the beginning. There are still species suffering under tyranny. There are still refugees with nowhere to go. There are still children looking up at the sky and seeing only darkness. We will find them. We will welcome them. We will show them what my grandmother showed that frightened child 50 years ago. That kindness exists. That strangers can become family. That no one has to face the darkness alone. The dawn has come, Jiho said, his voice ringing through the hall. Not just for humanity. Not just for the Villani. But for everyone who has ever been told that they were worthless, that they were alone, that no one would ever help them. We are that help. We are that hope. We are family. The hall erupted in cheers that lasted for 10 minutes. Beings who had never met before embraced each other. Tears flowed freely from eyes of every shape and color. Something new had been born. something that could never be destroyed. Later that evening, in a quiet garden on the outskirts of Bizin, an old Velani woman sat with her great-grandchildren. Her name was Mira. She was 140 years old by Velani counting, one of the oldest survivors of the original arrival. Her restaurant partner, Sujin, had died years ago, but their business had grown into a chain spanning 20 planets, run now by children and grandchildren from both families. The children gathered around Mira came from many species. Some had gray skin like hers. Some had the brown skin of humans. Some had scales or feathers or patterns of light that shifted with their emotions. But all of them called her grandmother, and all of them loved her stories. "Tell us again," they begged, as children always do. "Tell us about the arrival." Mira smiled, her amber eyes bright with memories of joy and sorrow and everything in between. "We fell from the sky," she began, her voice soft but clear. "We were so afraid. We had lost everything. Our home, our families, our hope. We thought we were going to die among monsters on a primitive world." The children listened with wide eyes. "And then," Myra continued, "a woman named Yuna ran toward us instead of away. She knelt down in front of a frightened child, took off her jacket, and wrapped it around the little one's shoulders. She spoke words we could not understand, but her kindness needed no translation." "That was Grandmother Yuna," one of the children said. "The statue in the harbor." "Yes," Myra said. "That was her. And she was not alone. Everywhere we landed, humans came to help us. They fed us. They housed us. They protected us. They gave us something we had never expected to find." "What?" the children asked. "Family," Myra said. "They gave us family, and we gave them the same gift in return. We became one people, not because we were the same, but because we chose each other." She looked up at the night sky, where starships moved between worlds that had once been empty and cold, but were now filled with life and laughter. The hegemony thought they were punishing us when they sent us to Earth. They thought humans would destroy us. They were so very wrong. Myra gathered her great-grandchildren close, feeling the warmth of their small bodies against her old bones. "Humans taught us something important," she said. "Something the hegemony never understood. The universe is not a small place where everyone must fight for scraps. The universe is infinite, and so is love. There is always room for one more at the table. There is always space in the family for one more member. That is what humanity gave us. That is their gift to the galaxy. Not technology, not weapons, not power, just love. Simple, stubborn, infinite love." She closed her eyes and listened to her grandchildren breathing, to the sounds of the city around her, to the hum of ships passing overhead carrying beings from 100 worlds. "And it was enough," she whispered. "It was always enough." The stars shone down on Earth, on a world that had changed the galaxy by choosing kindness, on a family that had grown to span the universe. The dawn had come at last, and it was beautiful.